He was prone to depression and was often involved in bitter arguments with other scientists. But by the early 1700s, he was the dominant figure in British and European science. He died on March 31, 1727. He was very influential. His influence is still here today. The medical model that we have, and we haven't been talking about what's going on in the medical model, is still based on Newton. And now that's changing. And we're starting to see enough people are understanding and knowing what's going on, and that model is changing. Go to the next one. Here's one of the major influences that brought about some of that change. Albert Einstein. Everybody knows of him and heard of him. Born March 14th, yay Pisces. I'm a Pisces too, so I kind of resonate with him a little bit. He was German also. I'm German. But anyway, so Einstein was regarded as the father of modern physics, and he also was very influential. Now there was other guys that was going on, Max Planck, and you've heard of Schrodinger's cat, and some of these. Those were in the time of study when Einstein was here too. His most famous equation is the E equals mc squared. So it talks about the theory of relativity. And Newton was saying it's this way or no way. Einstein saying, who knows, it could be any way. And there was another guy who talked about it, and we'll see in quantum physics what that really is. Okay, next. Anyway, it was good while I studied it. Just talks a lot about who Einstein was and what he did. Next slide. I think you can really understand Einstein by a lot of his quotes. He had a lot of quotes. And being a Pisces, he was a lover, and he was also a dreamer. Any man who can drive, he was a quote of the day and was spoken to him, any man who can drive safely while kissing a pretty girl is simply not giving the kiss the attention it deserves. He wrecked the car. Yeah, because he wrecked the car. He quoted that because he was in a restaurant or a cafe, and somebody had wrecked the car and he found out about it, and that's what Einstein said. He was tongue-in-cheek, a story about a young man. Another one he said is, when you're courting, this is the true theory of relativity, when you're courting a nice girl, an hour seems like a second. And when you sit on a red-hot cinder, a second seems like an hour. And that's relativity. Keeping it in perspective. And very simple-minded. I put up a few more of his quotes. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result or a different outcome. Not going to happen. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking that we use to create them. A lot of what we got to understand is that we do create a lot of our issues. And I think there's a verse that says we work out our salvation with fear and trembling, but we do it alone in some way. It's a personal work that we do, each one of us, in our walk in this earth. Now, just like a bird, and flocks of birds, and how they all work together, and you look how they can fly all in unison and be one. Okay, we work, you guys are doing a great job of supporting one another, building each other up. Now that's important, but it ultimately comes down to you, and how are you connected to God. So, great spirits have always been encountered with violent opposition from mediocre minds. And another one he talked about was there's infinite, and there's, he talks about God and how I think there's some infiniteness there. This is really paraphrasing it bad. And then he talks about stupidity, and he goes, that's definitely infinite. So in other words, a lot of people fail to really think and start to grasp, well, what's really going on in the next day. Learn from yesterday, live for today, hope for tomorrow. The important thing is to not stop questioning. Amen. And I don't propose to know all the truth, obviously, only that I seek it. Yes. I think that's what we should always try to strive and work towards, is to understand it, to live it better. Now we look at quantum theory. Really, this is just man's way of trying to describe it. Now, scientists are now proving that there is a God. Okay? That's good, but still, it's their way of describing, and can you really grasp in our finite mind what the infinite really is? I don't think you can. And when God created the light and that visible spectrum and the atoms and everything started working and gelling together, that's still not exactly who God was.
That's right.
And that's some of what we may not quite understand until we get to see face to face. But yet, we still want to seek it, keep searching and growing. Quantum physics is the theory that states that energy is emitted and absorbed by matter in very small amounts. And quantum physics really talks about what we call the subatomic things that goes on. In other words, the atoms, the electrons, the quarks, and all that stuff that's in subatomic. When you look at energy, when you break it all down, you know, you go into your cell, and then you go from your cell into the molecules, and you divide all them cells. You really boil down to what are we? We are molecules, we are atoms, we are all these things. And what they find is, by a lot of the study of quantum physics, it's not just the atom. Quantum is literally, it's just a packet, is all it means. It's a packet of energy, is what quantum, the word means. And that's what we are. We're energy. And that energy is light. So when we are fashioned out of the same light that God created on that first day, even though God created man on the sixth day, and even the animals on the fifth day, so fourth and fifth, and so you'll see that there's other things that were put in place by God, and it all comes from the beginning. Okay, so that's a quick overview of quantum physics. And when you start understanding what quantum physics and some of the studies that really goes, it just boggles your mind. Newton was involved with the universe is explained by specific physics and mathematics. It's a very ordered universe. The body is the same, a very ordered machine with a heart, a brain, and an engine that runs that machine. It's very materialistic, so to speak. In other words, it's a physical machine. Okay? Einstein and all of the other quantum physics and theorists and physicists, and even recent research shows now that the mind, body, and spirit connection is completely different than we ever thought it could be. And so that's a little what I want to touch on here. It's really changed our perception of reality in just the last 80 years. It's in its infancy. And literally just how the technologies are expanding and advancing so quickly and exponentially. I mean, you can buy a new computer and it's obsolete before you get it home because the technology is going on so fast. Well, mankind is rushing in the same way as far as knowing. When you talk about the X generation, they are extra special. They are tapped in, they're standing on our shoulders, and they're knowing stuff at 15, 20, 12 years old that I'm just now learning at 45, 50 years old. So there's an explosion of knowingness is what I call it. Okay? What we're talking about in quantum physics is the electromagnetic field and its interaction with the entire universe energetically that determines the function, not our genetics or DNA. We control our genetics and DNA by mind and what we think, what we believe. So a lot of that was, we all have already touched on. We already know that. Let's go to the next slide. Some of that takes place through the brain. That's just a physical property of the brain in which we can actually communicate and reason and know and understand. The brain really should only be a small portion of how we know things. And studies have been done of how the heart is more important. Go to the next one. Now from the brain, that's really a good picture of what's actually going on. How do we communicate with that electromagnetic field that is God, or that is here that we have attached with? How do I tell him that he had a problem at 10 years old? All you do is ask. And our brain literally puts out, it emits photons of light. That's what I was saying, some of the things that the research is, they've taken, they've built a chamber that's completely void of all light. You have to electromagnetically seal it off. I mean, just think of how many cell phones and electromagnetic radiation and radio waves and X-rays from outer space and everything, it gets bombarded on us all the time. And we call it EMF poisoning or pollution, or electromagnetic pollution. And that can actually affect your health. But our brains, our whole entire body, and literally, and what they found out is it emanates from the DNA. And they found that out by when they was looking at biophoton emissions from living things, whether it was plants or small animals or bacteria or humans. It's when there was damage or when there was stress. Under stress, your DNA goes, hold on, and it starts to emit light, and it starts to try to absorb light from out there. That's what we call the 0 point field. We're trying to absorb in order to protect, in order to save ourselves, so to speak. That's a survival mechanism that was built in, and they're starting to find out. It takes place when DNA is damaged or injured. Your body goes, it blows out light. It's out there looking for what can I do to pull it in. The more what we call in resonance, or in the more that we can find, I'm losing the word for it right now, but probably help. The coherence, there we go. Thank you. The more coherent, it's almost like, oh yeah, I brought it. It's like a laser beam. This light is so coherent and focused that, and we did this, we played with this out in the woods. My son and they took off on the other side of the hill, and it was literally a little over a quarter mile away, and you could shine it on you, and it was like, whoo, it hurt your eyes. So it's coherent, it's very strong, it's very narrow, it's very focused. That's what a laser beam is. Okay? So what we find, let's go to the next slide. If you think you can, you're right. If you think you can't, you're also right. And so what I want to see is, or what I want to try to help you to understand is that when you focus your attention on something, or when your body is in that survival mode, you can stay stuck there. And that's what we want to try to help us understand is how do we get out of that. And you already have heard from the rest of the group here this morning, there is a way out of that pattern. Okay? So, coherent. When our body is very coherent, we do not emit a lot of light. In other words, we don't emit that damage. We become more strong and grounded, so to speak, or centered is another word for it. Okay? Being in touch, I believe, and that's something what we want to talk about too, is how do we connect with that? And how is it that I have learned how to connect with that? Okay, next one. You have to understand in healing, there's something we call the placebo effect. So now we're talking about mind and body. And what is the placebo effect? It's a belief that a person has, and it overrides their biology or their physiology. The doctor says, you've got cancer. Oh, no, I don't. I don't accept that. Okay? There's a lot to that. A whole lot to that. And you don't, the medical field and the studies that goes on do not expound upon the fact of what that really is and how powerful that really is. And really, it's a belief system. 1/3 of all healing can be attributed to placebo. They did experiments where it had knee pain and knee damage, knee injury, and arthritis. They did a fake surgery, and over 1/3 of the people, some got the real surgery and some got a sham surgery. A significant portion of those was sham surgeries. All they did is cut the skin and sew it back up. And they didn't tell them about it. 3 years later, these people are like, man, that surgery just fixed it all up. That's the placebo effect. And that was a huge study that was done. It's kind of like, you pull the wool over your eyes, but yet it worked. Okay? What we are is we're connected to an energy field, and we have a self-healing capacity. And we do that by what you think about, you bring about. What you focus on becomes stronger. So what we want to do is we want to pay attention. Think about what you think about when you think about it. So, and when you talk about thinking and beliefs, you talk about positive way of thinking. And I don't think it's as much the power of positive thinking as much as more power is the power of negative thinking. And a lot of people, and we know a lot of people, you're around them, they're like, they just kind of rub me wrong. And you can tell, you can feel it. And you can tell they're having trouble. It's not that we're going to judge them for where they are and what they're they got mud on them that's shutting down their life, or it's damaging their DNA, and we got to help bring that up, to find compassion for that. But they feel that they're a positive person. The best way I heard this described was the one that I learned a lot of my technique from, where he says people are not always positive, as it seems, but they're positive about the way they think, because they've always thought that way. Okay, so they're stuck in a pattern of thinking that to them they're positive, they're sure, they know this is the way it is. Well, it can be different. So you have to be open to the possibilities. And listening into the Spirit, like what you've all been talking about, is how we do that. So emotions and beliefs. They can be our best friend and also be our worst enemy. And let's go to that. Now let's talk a little bit about the 0-point field. I'm going to get a little drink of water. The 0-point field, what is it? And that's the interaction. And just to say it in a nutshell, I'm going to throw it out there. And I'm still doing some research on this. I believe it's the obscure, the backside, how God separated the light from the darkness. That's the support. That's back there to support the light. You know, that's all here on our physical plane. And we can connect with that. But as we see God in creation, we can also connect through creation, through Jesus even, back to God. Because Jesus was there as the one that actually through him all things were created. So energy between subatomic particles is what the definition, best definition of the 0-point field. Like, I can send him some energy. If he's sensitive, he'll feel it. And he doesn't have to be just sitting right there in order to help that person. That's what I call prayer on steroids. You can send energy, you can help people, and it's been proven scientifically. Like whoever was here that said they got a headache, automatically I'm sending them a prayer, sending them a heal to help that. And then it works. How do you explain it otherwise except for the fact that you're just sending energy and it's from a distance? That's a lot of what this talks about, the 0-point field. That's what they're starting to, they can't believe how powerful it is. But it's really, it's the space where it jumps back and forth, like right here. That spot right there, there's a particle, they call it a virtual particle. And they've actually can measure it. It takes place in a millionth of a second. That's a pretty short span of time. And it's not very much energy. There's not a lot of energy there. You can't feel it and touch it just when I'm always going right here. I mean, we can feel it energetically when you're very sensitive to that. But those subatomic particles, they don't just like this laser, it can go as far as you can think. It goes into the universe. It goes into everything. The 0-point field is not just on the earth. It goes everywhere. And you can actually, what they're finding out is you can tap into that energy, and that's what some of the new physicists and the new generations are going to be working with. It's a tiny virtual particle that carries energy and information. That's the most important part. I believe that's how you can tap in to find out where's your interference. It happened here on your timeline. Okay? That's what we're tapping into when we do what we do with our work. Okay? So it interacts with the entire universe, although it's just one tiny spot. When you amplify it, when you connect it, everybody on the earth and everything that's created in the earth, the animals and everything in communication with God, because it's always there, that connection that's always there. God has his hand on this. He didn't just like go, now I'm going to go over here and books right. Now I'm going to go here and do whatever I want to. You guys just hang out. You know, God will never leave us. He'll never forsake us. He has his hand on us and is helping us all the time. Every aspect of creation. So that's the way I see how that is so immensely magnified in energy. And that's what they're finding out in science, that how much energy is there. They long story short, last night, well, 2 o'clock this morning, I found it on the web. There was some work that's actually being done. Just in 2012, this guy, he created how he can harness that 0-point energy. He took a 70-pound cannonball, an old cannonball, and he had it sitting on his table. And he had other things where it would just sit there and vibrate, and all of a sudden it'd go, it'd blow off the table. It's he was levitating things. Just with, he had these contraptions and machines that would actually focus its energy, and he was literally pulling it from the 0-point field. He literally picked that 70-pound ball up, and it was just literally up in the air and shaking and then turning, and it started twisting, and just literally, and all of a sudden it just like off the table. So it's like out there that's going on that we don't even quite understand, but some of them are starting to understand really what the power of that field is. So we're going to really, I would spend a little time on that, but really how do we connect to that field? It's by a biophoton emission. It gets back to how our DNA, how our body emits light, how we are a living system. The biofield of our body, it surrounds all living systems. Around plants, that plant's a little bit not alive, but you take a live plant and you can feel it. You can take a picture of it, an energetic picture of it, and you can see it radiate. And there's whole other kinds of, when you get into the study of what they've done with that, how they create holograms. You can take a hologram picture of just one molecule, that leaf, and it shows you the whole plant in the hologram. So there's information that takes place in this biofield. The energy field that directs, this energy field is what directs the function and development of it. That was actually a statement that Einstein said. The field directs the particle or the matter. It's not the matter that creates the field, it's the field that moves the matter. If you follow that. So when God created the light, all of that's there, that electromagnetic field or the visible spectrum, all that was created there. It's that directs the physicality. When God breathed into man, or when he created that, that's the magnetic effect of who we are. Think about it. We started off first as one cell of mom and one cell of dad. When they come together, and if you look at it under a microscope and watch that fertilization take place around anything, there's literally thousands of the sperm that are there to fertilize one egg. Why did only one get through? Because it had the same resonant energy of the dad that needed to come through to connect with the mom. You understand what I mean there? In other words, you're here for a reason. There was a reason when these two got together. And how much thought does it take to make that happen? It's a miracle. It takes place right there. That's right. And it takes place, and they can monitor it. And how they still can't describe how do these cells differentiate. It starts as 2 cells, goes to 4, and goes to 8, and then about 16, and this cell goes off and goes, where's he going? Well, he's going over there to make the nervous system. Well, where's that cell going? It's going over there to make the left toe. You know, how does it do that? It's all directed by the field. It's all directed by that 0-point field that surrounds all living systems. That's an intelligent field. Okay? Now the next one. Okay, heart energy. I'm sorry, go back one. Thank you. The heart energy of the field, and I want to talk about that coherent or incoherent just a little bit too. And it's listening to that voice like you said. We got to get out of our head and get into our heart.
Come on.
More of what's going on when we interfere with our body is we are in fear. And your fear or your thinking, the more you think about it, the more you create trouble with it. In other words, you have to be able to connect to what we call the 0-point field. You've got to connect with God. And what they found in some of the studies on heart energy, your heart is a whole nother nervous system. It has its own particular nervous system that makes it function and work. It sends out 15 times more energetically. You can get an encephalogram off a person, or an EKG off of a person practically without even having the electrodes on it. You can get it without even having to attach the electrodes to it. So it's electrical. Okay? ECG, or the brain scans, that's a little different. And it takes highly sensitive equipment to pick up those brain emissions. But the heart is like, it's way out there. And what they're finding is that the biophotons that's produced by the heart, when they're very coherent, that's when you're healthy. And the heart works. And it's a dancing rhythm, so to speak. when it gets under stress, and we put it under stress, whether physically, emotionally, or even nutritionally, then it starts to like pull into itself and just get boom, boom, specific rhythm. It's not dancing rhythm, it's survival rhythm. Okay? So there's a difference. Some of the studies they did with heart research and how it communicates, they did a study where they had this group of people randomly look at pictures. You know, sometimes there were a picture of a person that went through a car accident. It's like, oh, you look at it, it's like, holy cow. And then sometimes it's a snake coming at you. Sometimes it's a beautiful scene in a mountain meadow. Okay? What they found was, even though it was a random, this is the cool part of it, even though it was a random by the computer, it's kind of like the computer was randomly throwing the pictures up, the heart would change before the picture appeared. And it knew to go fearful at the car accident, and it knew how to go, wow, at the beautiful mountain picture. The sensitivity of the heart is even before it happens. And so that's where I look at the time scale. God also created time. It's something we didn't talk about when you talk about that, what did he create? Time was also created on that first day. Time for us and time for we do. Time is eternal. Okay? It goes forward and it goes backwards. Although we're here now, it's a continuum. Okay? There's a whole bunch of physics that goes with that too. So what I'm trying to say is the heart senses that. So don't lose connection with your heart. Guard your heart. Guard your heart, because out of it are the issues of life. So that's what you got to get in touch with. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Let's see what I presented. That's the rings of a tree. Trees have memory, and that's our good friend and our bad friend, because that's us too. We have memory. So we can, and a lot of what you find is that your memory is what we call plastic. It's moldable, it's changeable. As you go through life, you can rewrite your memory, so to speak. For the good or for the bad. It can make you bitter or it can make you better. And a lot of times you will read, that's why some people can see a situation, another person sees it, and they get two completely different stories about what really happened. And they form their own memory about it. That's the randomness that goes on in quantum physics. There's a law of probability that's just there. Okay? That's how we perceive things. So what I'm saying is that we've got stored information or memory, and that's what goes into that 0-point field. God is not limited by time, and that's what we're dealing with when we're dealing in that field. So therefore, that's how you can actually ask, and you will know. You can ask the body, what happened? Where's the interference for this situation? And it gets deeper than that. Okay, so go next slide. So what is the cause of all disease? It's interference. A lot of times it's when we interfere between our head and our heart. We get to thinking too much about where it should be, or where we want it to be, or where we have to have it. And that's not really the way it is. It is the way it is. Okay, so that's that interference. It can occur, next slide. It separates us from our body. It miscommunicates our body. Whether you've had a trauma, or you got, hit by a car in your knee, or you had a bad injury, sometimes that can stay stuck in your field. There's ways to release that, ways to eliminate that. A lot of it's just bringing us back to earth and what we've created as. Some of the new stuff we've been doing is mud packing. You literally pack a person in clay and it releases that field. A lot of times it's emotional. You get an emotional injury that goes with injuries. So you get separations and interference within the body. And you also get a separation from the source. I think 2 Corinthians chapter 3 and chapter 4 is a very powerful one, as well as Colossians chapter 3. But it says there, so all of us who have had that veil removed can see and reflect the glory of the Lord. And we can remove the interference when we got a better understanding of who God really is. That took place when Moses got when he was on the mount for 40 days, he couldn't see God. He had to put a veil over his face. Well, Jesus, when he came, he changed all He removed the veil. Okay? So now we can see God through faith. And that's how things have changed since He came. Okay? So it says, whoop, thank you. And the veil is removed, and we can see and reflect the glory of the Lord. And the Lord, who is the Spirit, makes us more and more like Him as we are changing into His glorious image. So, it's a very powerful verse that tells us what's really going on. And that's what I'm trying to share with you today, is that, the quantum physics are starting to see that stuff that's actually going on, and the Bible teaches us and tells us about that. The more you understand that and learn it. 2 Corinthians 4:6, and it says, "For God, who said, 'Let there be light,' in the darkness, has made this light shine in our hearts, so that we could know the glory of God that is seen in the face of Jesus Christ." Okay? And one last one then, too. In the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your Heavenly Father. And that's what we're here for. We're beings of light. Okay? And if you squash and you get too much mud on you, and you can't get that mud off of you to let your light shine. And I heard just the other day was in a recording I was listening to, is that what if the only reason we came here was to share our light, to share who we are, and we don't do that? We let fear get in the way, we let that trauma get in the way, we let, if I never would have had that accident, or if I never would have had, we rationalize it could be there, but it shouldn't have been that way. We should all over ourselves. Okay? That's just the way it was. But this tells us that's what we're here for. We're here to be who we are, and why we came and to share our life. So that's mostly what I have to talk about. If there's any other questions or comments or anything I can help you with further, I'd be glad to do that. One thing I do want to, I guess, how do we get in touch with that? I guess I want to touch on kind of dovetail on what you were talking about, like some of the others were talking about. Is that how I have learned to do that? When I used to go out in the woods, just do some deer hunting and animal hunting and stuff like that. And when I'm working with patients, I'm always asking yes and no. All you got to do is ask yes, and the body goes, yes. You ask no, and the body goes, no. And all you do is you listen to that. So when I'm going through and I'm finding out when Brother Mike said, happened to me at 10 years old, I just go through, where's the interference, does it happen here, I go through all these questions, it's like, timeline, okay, timeline. It goes back 10 years old, this is when it happened. Okay? All that there again, it's that information in the 0.2 we're talking about, but it's a yes and a no. And actually, I've learned how to not do yes and no, it's a yes and a no. In other words, I feel it here, yes. So back to when I was deer hunting, I'd connect with God, give me a yes, there's God. Give me a no, good, okay, I'm connected to God. And I say, where are they at? And I could ask specifically, and I could get very close, when my boys were with me, and you could find them. And I had a dog with me one time, so I kind of played with it. I did my own experiment in the woods, and I was told that the deer would be 450 yards right up in here. So I go running up through there, and the dog would take off because he'd smell the deer and hear the deer, and sure enough, there they go. Okay? It happens. We have that communication. So really all we want to do is, how can you figure out the yes, how can you figure out the no? That's some of the stuff we want to teach people to do, and that's how you can start helping other people to do that. One other thought is, we got to get out of our heads. We're going to be scattered with so much information and so much, like we saw that EMF or that electromagnetic pollution, that we're no longer connected to Earth, we're no longer connected to God. We're being separated. And I like what you said, there's a lot of good people still out there. There's a lot of good people that are still connected. And there's a lot of fear that's going on, and that seems to grow, but we can also change that. Right. So what I'm saying is that we can get in touch with that. A real simple technique and start practicing it how do I do what I've done? I've done it for 30 years. Well, it's come old, it's second nature to me now when I think about it. Okay? Use this thought when you're doing like a meditation or your prayer or you're connecting to God. Where you want to go is to nothingness. And the nothingness is the knowingness, and that's the space in space, the 0 point field, when I call it that, where that information lies. So how you do that, to quiet your mind, is you go with real strong intention, I wonder where my next thought's going to come from. And as you listen in that quiet space, stay there as long as you can. And just be open. You may have a thought comes in, just like recognize it, watch it go down the stream, and right on through, you stay in that space. The longer you can stay in that space, all of a sudden, if you go into that space with an intention, I want an answer about something, all of a sudden it's just like, aha. You'll get a light comes on. You'll get a no, you'll get a voice, you'll get a here it is. Here's what you need to do, and you need to take action on this, and that'll get you out of the situation you're in. And I believe that's what we're doing when we do that, is that you're connecting with God through Christ. So, that's just one little technique that I've come up with that seems to help. And the more you do that, the more you can get there, the more you can stay there and do that. And then it becomes second nature, and you're there all the time. I think it means pray without ceasing. You're always in that communication and connection. So, any questions?
Angel, turn this on. Let's see if his mic's good.
Testing.
Sometimes when we turn these on, it'll cause his mic to screw up.
We'll stand back here. The Bible says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. I thought as he was speaking, almost every slide, I could think of scripture in a moment. Almost every one. Okay. Does kinesiology fit in this also, in this realm? Kinesiology?
Kinesiology. A lot of what you can do to kind of read the body is you can physically test it as well, and there's an applied kinesiology. Every muscle in the body is associated with a specific organ, like diabetes, pancreas, liver, adrenal, pituitary. Those are the organ systems that affect diabetes. Okay, you find out, well, where's the interference? Is it the pituitary is the primary problem? You test Perry's major muscle. Or is it the liver and you test pectoralis major? So each organ of the system of the body associates with a specific muscle. So you can do it that way, or you can just ask the body and know it as well. You can do it by muscle testing, or you can do it by, there's a whole new way of testing that's even more accurate. It's called three-ring circuits, by testing an O-ring test. And that's how you can even test yourself to find out yes and no. You can take a ring, give it a yes, pull it, it's strong. Give me a no, and oops, it breaks. So when it goes weak, that tells you that system is not as strong as it should be. So therefore it's giving you feedback as to what's yes and what's no, what's interfering in that person's body or in yourself.
Can you demonstrate like you did for me?
You can.
This first thing he does when I go to him.
Okay. A lot of what you do, there you go, just turn it around. What I call a three-ring circus, he's got thumb and ring finger together, and I put my two rings in there with it, and we're literally just pulling apart. Okay? And so give me an absolute yes, you can do it that way, or give me an absolute no. And it goes pretty weak. Now, you're like, okay, well, he faked it. No, I don't care how strong he is. And the best example I had of that is one time when I first started practice, some bodybuilder from down in Springfield hurt his leg and it wasn't healing right. He came up for me to check it. And, I mean, this guy could bench press 500 pounds. And so I had him laying on the table, and I went to push his arm, and when I had him do something or think a thought, it just went down. He goes, whoa, hold on. I goes, I wasn't ready. And I took my pinky, I said, okay, tell me you're ready. And I took my pinky and just, so that's how powerful it is in your testament person, how powerful it can be. Okay? So there's an art to it. There's an understanding that comes with it. You can do it another way, even by testing an arm. So have your hold, just hold strong. Okay? Think of the thought, my name is Mike. And then hold strong. Now think, my name is Fred. And then hold strong. And you can't tell yourself a lie.
That's right, come on.
Okay? And some of the other research I was doing in quantum physics and some of the things, there's, your brain will fabricate the lie, and it takes place in a different part of the brain than it does when you speak some truth. Truth comes from the frontal and the precentral gyrus. Lies come from back in the temporal and parietal lobes. You fabricate it. You can be very good at lying. You can learn how to lie good enough where you can fool other people, but you can do a real-time live MRI, and when a person's thinking a thought or saying a truth, and they're starting to consider, are they going to use it in forensics in a court of law, whether a person's telling the truth or not. So anyway, cool stuff.
That is cool. Any questions?
I have one.
Okay, hang on.
Unscientific fact. You know how Paul would go into the third heaven a lot. Have they messed around with that?
Say again?
When Paul would go up to the third heaven, has quantum messed with that at all? Are electrons vibrating at a higher frequency when we as humans see into the third heaven or into the supernatural realm? Have they discovered anything there?
I believe my take on this is when Paul talked about, I don't remember if I was in the third heaven or the ninth heaven or where was I, but I know it's like we call an out-of-body experience. I believe that's what he did. He literally, you can go there, you can be there. Some of the military's done stuff on that. Is it possible? Of course it's possible. And it does happen. You can go, some of the altered states, some of the monks, Zen monks as well as monks from the 1600s and earlier, the 800s, Augustine and some of these others, if you read a lot of their stuff, when they go into the mystics, shamans, shamanim, meaning lofty or air, they take a travel, they take a journey. They say that's the true reality. I believe that's true. That's where the true reality is. And we're just here in the physical. Okay? So yeah, I think that's what that was meaning, is that Paul actually went there and he saw things and heard things and knew things. And he couldn't even explain or talk about it because some people aren't able to handle it. They're not able to really understand what that is. And you can go to those places, I believe. I believe to do that, purity, holiness or purity, whatever the word holy means pure, it means sanctified, it means set apart. It means we got to be humble and powerful at the same time. And that's where I think when your light emissions draw into so strong that you are central and you can travel, so to speak. So the mystics have done it through the ages, the shaman, every culture has stories of their shamans and how they go out and bring information back to help a person heal. For Paul, it was a way of understanding of the higher knowledge that needed to be shared or had to be understood. So, I don't know if that helps, if that was your question.
I think we have to grow into this way.
I was just curious on the physical level, who our electrons change.
I'm sorry,
I was just curious on a physical level. Quantum is showing us through science what is happening in the spiritual level.
yes.
Do the electrons change? Do we know, since we are atomic energy, which is proton, neutron, electron, do our electrons speed up when there's a higher resonance? Do we know that as quantum
I believe that's true, yeah, the electron, I mean the field, the electromotive force, or the resonance. In quantum physics, it can be a particle or it can be a wave, and I think when you go to those places, it's a wave emanating, okay? So the electron cloud, what they find is it's not contained just to the atom. It can break off and go anywhere. And it's a photon of light. So, yeah, in a sense, it's a changing of the electron cloud, but it's more a resonance, I believe. It's a more of an entrainment, is another word they use for it.
I think what she most wants to know is, what is the scientific knowledge of that? How is science discovering it? What do we have from science that says, yes, this is what happens?
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Maybe that's
there,
a
I don't
good
even know if it's there yet.
How is science researching that? And that's been the problem for the last 80 years. How can you set up, because science has to do it like regimented, controlled. A lot of these things in vitro, so to speak, and in vivo, if you know what those words mean. When you take something out and put it in a laboratory, it changes the whole thing. Okay? In quantum physics, it can be a particle, it can be a wave. It's only a particle when you measure it. And what they find is what we call the collapse of the wave. There could be multiple possibilities of what's going to take place in the next second. Okay, what I thought about didn't happen, but in other words, each second, each moment in time, it's a dance, so to speak, and it could be anything. So when I'm working with a person too, here's how I do it, I guess, is what they find is when you collapse the wave, it's like Schrodinger's cat. Does anybody know what I mean by Schrodinger's cat? There you go. It could be both things at the same time until you look at it. And now it's this. So when you observe it, that's why it's so hard to study it from a scientific point of view, is because when you observe it, it changes everything. When you let it happen without even being observed, something else could possibly happen. So if you understand what I mean, that's why it's been hard to say, here's what it is. But you're now starting to get instrumentation so sensitive that it picks up things. It can see electrons now, whereas days of Newton, there was only a thought of the imagination, a possibility. And now what they used to call some of the electron cloud and all that, and this connection that we have with the zero-point field, it's what we call string theory. And the microtubules of every cell in the brain are actually built what we call microtubules. And yet they can see it now. And it's so tiny. And the only thing that goes through there is literally it's like an electron. It's almost as small. Okay? And by the traveling through these microtubules, it makes that connection out there into that space. So it's hard to measure, but there are doing some things that do that. Kind of a spoof on it, one of my favorite movies is When You Stare at Ghosts. Sorry, if you've never seen it, you look at it and you're like, this is crazy. You know, but some of the stuff is what actually has gone on. Military has done a lot of studies and how it was all about George Clooney stared at this goat and he surprised him and he worked at stopping the heart of the goat. The goat all over dead. Well, it was kind of a spoof on what there was stuff like that that was actually going on, so the research. That's what I was saying, where they can do randomized studies, double-blind studies, it's difficult, but they are finding ways to do that.
Question?
Just as a parent, I'm looking for a little bit of practical application.
Can't hear him.
For post-traumatic stress disorder, is there any application for what you were talking about?
Showing an application of doing?
What
Healing.
post-traumatic stress disorder? You know, I mean, other than, you know, the psychotropic drugs and everything that goes on, because my daughter,
Oh. I get that interpreter, sorry.
it's just as weird for me as it is, you know, talking about Eastern
Post-traumatic syndrome, is that what you asked?
stress.
Okay. Yugoslavia, when Kosovo went through so much of the traumatic stuff that they went through, part of the, that was probably the best demonstration. In order to hurt these people and control these people, they would pick 2 members of their family and kill them in front of them. Talk about stress. And when they went over and saw some of this stuff that was going on, these people are just like zombies. They can't, they're just in shutdown mode. They took some of these techniques. Some of it was what we call an EFT or tapping, and then there was a whole new other technique of how to release that. Not just years of studying, years of talking to the therapist, but within days, they're back to laughing and joy and finding a way to reconnect with it. That's what you can do when you do some of this work. You can release those traumas. And so I'm glad you asked that. That's just happened in just the last couple of years of how they've literally helped that society by taking some of this technology and this information to them to help. And some guy stepped out there and he did it. He showed his life right there on it. I forget where I was going with that. But anyway, okay. When we go into a state of trauma, whether it's a car accident, you get so much pain in your body shuts down. It's a survival mechanism. I like to call it the cat playing with the mouse. You ever watch a cat play with a mouse and it'll bat it around, and that mouse, it just overloads its nervous system. It just goes boom. And the cat goes, and the mouse kind of comes alive and starts to walk, and the cat goes over and pop, and gets it again, and then knocks it out. It's just unconscious. And if the cat's doing it, it's a cat and mouse game that it plays in order to fortify or energetically change its food before it eats it. That's part of what it does. But our bodies do the same thing. When we're in so much trauma, we shut down. We go into survival mode. And literally, portions of the brain, you can see it on MRI, when you think a thought that's a stress thought to you, it literally shuts down. And energetically, electrically, portions of the brain that should function. Okay? So that's what happens. As you're touching it or tapping it or making your body aware of it, or you're what I call applying a healing thought over top of it, it releases that trauma, and you can now break free of it. And so what used to be when you remembered that event, you didn't go, you go, oh, thank you, I found something to do with that. Now I've learned from it. So that's really what it's about getting beyond those traumas. It gets embedded. It gets embedded in what we call your engrams, your pattern. And you gotta change it. Sometimes we can do it ourselves. Sometimes it takes somebody else to help you do it.
That's why in my trauma, there was a deal between me and Dad, and I told you the story. But I'd forgiven Dad a long time ago. It wasn't no sexual thing, and it was something he required me to do. I thought it was impossible. I forgave Dad a long time ago. But he said, how'd you say that? It's still in my bones, or in my...
It's in your, literally, it gets stuck in your DNA. It gets in what we call cellular memory. That's a whole other study, is that it's not just in your brain, it's in every cell of your body. That's right. That the memory gets stuck.
Now, he was working with me. I'd already forgiven Dad years ago. Me and Dad are buddies, and Dad's my hero, and has been for years. And he said, but it was stuck in your DNA. Well, he said, just like forgiveness. And he's touching my body. I didn't say anything. In my thought process, I said, Dad, I forgive you. He said, there it went. He didn't hear anything out of me.
And that's really how it does it. It's like, and there's, I believe it's called the ABCs, always be clear. No matter where you go, and when you look at the 0-point field, the person that, I use that. The person that's sitting in another chair may have been having a stress. Literally, some of that gets stuck and embedded in that chair. Okay? And there's a whole guy that's in Hawaii that does this, that he says he's always clearing. Clear the room, clear the energy of the room, clear yourself. It's everywhere. And we have to be resonating with that love frequency. The way you get there, there's 4 steps. I love you. I'm sorry, please forgive me, and thank you. When you do it for yourself, or when he did it for his dad, or when his dad, it works both ways. And how this guy figured it out is that he had a prison ward a psych ward where these prisoners could not even function in society. They were so disjointed. This guy was a psychologist. He went in there and actually healed them, and he never even saw the patient. All he did was go through their files and find out their profile, and then he would go, whatever happened was, he would just go through that healing process. Love, forgiveness. He did it as if he was them, and it changed them, and they become functional people again back in the society. So you can't talk enough about what we think about, we bring about, and connect to that. So you had a question.
I don't know if it's so much a question as I won't really talk about this, but because I think John said people think I'm crazy when I talk about an out-of-body experience, and that actually happened to me. I don't know. At home, something hot hit my feet and engulfed me. 2 weeks later, I'm at church, and I have an out-of-body experience. At that time, I don't even think I heard about a Zen monk. Maybe heard about it, but had never, and it was nobody to explain this to me because I was in a Baptist church. We didn't see miracles.
Yeah.
We didn't see anything. But I actually saw the smoke, the mist that filled the whole church while I was having this experience. And as I was looking at myself talking to the minister, dressed the same as I was dressed, but I was standing over here. I call it the Truman. Was standing over there talking to him. I was that other person that was going, how did you know to say that? But very vivid. Room was full of, as I was crying, and I saw everybody in white, and everybody was crying, and this thing that had been on me, this heat thing that had concealed me, slowly started peeling off to the point that I can even breathe. And now, who in the world was I going to tell? Only reason I'm telling you today is because you talked about it. I don't really share that because everybody thinks you're kind of crazy anyway.
Yeah.
So
Einstein said it this way: I don't know if I'm hazy or if just everybody else is crazy. So that was your experience, and I think you were given that experience to validate that's who you are. And that is very true that takes place. People have those experiences. There's chiropractors, there's energy healers that are coming forth now, that this has been in place for the last 30 to 40 years. There's more energy healers working now, this month's day. And they're not up in front of it, they're not slaying the spirit from the preacher. The chiropractor walks in and he's like, right there's your interference, they'll touch you, and they just, boom, they hit the ground. And they say they go places when they do that. And wherever they went, they wake back up, and an ailment that's been there for 20 years is just gone instantly. So that's the cool stuff that's going on that we can be in touch with. Don't push it down. And it'll happen when you don't expect it, because it's a validity for you. You can't force it, but it's very good.
Good question. What keeps us from moving into that knowing? A trivia question.
Fear.
One other thing. Fear.
Disbelief.
What you said, Yoder?
Disbelief.
Disbelief? So I'm looking for something else.
I think
It's religion.
yeah.
Religion keeps us that, because we've been set in stone, our doctrine. And if it's outside of that, it's all heresy. Are you there with me? Now, we feel that it's pitiful for those that don't understand that, but those who are ahead of us, it looks like heresy, till we get there. Then it's truth.
yeah.
You see what I mean? So, religion is the biggest opposition to moving in what God's doing next. And as much as he's talked about what science is now seeing, remember this: God is doing the same in the spirit. He has to let us feel like we're dreaming something sometimes, We have a very good friend. I don't know if David back there knows. Did you ever know Sister Ramsey over at Faith Tabernacle? I don't know if she's still living or not. She died. But many years ago, we was concerned about her. And I asked, you know, Bill Foreman, David, and I asked Bill, I said, how's Sister Ramsey doing? He said, started to tell me. He said, well, you ought to know. You was there, you know, Linda was there last night. He said, I went to see her this morning and said, she's upbeat. He said, you ought to know. She told me, he said, Mike and Linda was there and prayed for me last night. We didn't know it.
Wow.
But something in the spirit, and I think the church is going to open. When I say the church, I'm talking about not this church, but just, you know, we are the church. It's not the building anyway. But people are going to begin to be open to that.
Right. Oh, yeah.
A lot more. Those who are going to move on in God's going to begin to be open to things that we ain't even heard of before.
The word is ecclesia, meaning called out.
That's right.
Go ahead.
You know, I gotta turn it on.
Talk.
My son was murdered a few years back, and when I got that news, my body shut down, and I went into a survival mode. It was a dark place. It was a very fearful place, and only through the truth of God, because I asked him, I said, Lord, you know, you said you work good through all things. I don't see any good in this. Can you show me? Can you tell me the reason why? And he did, and that truth brought life back into me. But as he was telling, that traumatic experience was locked up in my DNA. That wasn't released until years later. I didn't even know it was there. Honestly, I never knew that I was mad at God and was harboring bitterness and resentment towards him for allowing my son to go back to him where he came from to begin with. And so there's a lot that you have said here that has opened up a realm that we kind of thought was there. But it's kind of like, I don't dare say anything about this because they're going to think I'm loony, you know what I'm saying? But I know that our God is a bigger God than what we can understand or what we can explain or what we can even think about. And with that, I want to say that light, the truth, the word, light, is that healing force, is that attracting force. And I'm so thankful for you being here today because you unlocked some things for me that I've for 10 years, you know.
Well, what I admire about you all have a freedom here that you don't see in a lot of places. In a lot of groups.
Right, amen.
It's like you were talking about religion. They tend to be conformed and controlled. That you've got a freedom to speak your heart, and you don't feel threatened by that.
Right.
And that's a lot of the love that God says for us to have for one another, that we have to have in order for others to see that God's really working. So that's good. I appreciate that.
Well, I don't talk about this to anybody. My husband, I told Ned and Suzanne. But it must have been like 12 or 15 years ago while I had back problems. Well, probably ever since I was a child, and had had multiple surgeries on my back. And I was, at the time we were living in a little trailer out in the country. And I was laying on the couch, had been suffering for days with pain. And I thought I was asleep, but I could hear everything in the room. And then I was over myself, looking at myself. And I left the trailer and started walking in the woods. And then I just began to move my arms up and down, and I flew. I flew away. And when I came back to my body, the pain that I had all my life in my back was gone. And I don't tell that because Everybody thinks I'm a little off anyway. But that happened to me,
Wow.
That's awesome.
and it's
That is
wonderful,
awesome.
wonderful.
That's good.
Anybody else?
I feel like I'm supposed to say something good. This is only my second Sunday here, but I know I was supposed to come. I'm from a very religious background. Pastor Mike at the health food store where I work, and 3 years ago, I couldn't do it anymore. I'd given up. I didn't think Christianity worked. I had read a book called Pagan Christianity, and it brought me to my knees, and I needed to be there. I needed to release God to be who He is, to let religion go. And I was a cessationist. I was raised to be a cessationist. I went to Bible college to be a cessationist. We didn't believe that the gifts of the Spirit or the Holy Spirit were for today. And went to a little church there in Wichita where I was. My pastor and his wife laid hands on me and just asked that the gifts would be released, that the Holy Spirit would be released. And I came up here. My daughters wanted to go to IHOP. And I've been through a divorce. I've been married to a kinesiologist for 30 years, and I came up here to get away. And, I thought it would be all about my daughters. Going to IHOP, I'd go to the prayer room with them. But I had a little vision, and I didn't even know what it was in the prayer room, that I saw a little baby, and she was dead, and she was wrapped in a blanket. And I thought it was mine. I had lost my first child when I was in Bible college. It looked a lot like her. And the Lord began to speak to me, and He said, "No, that's you, Sherry." And there was a little dirty secret over my life in the midst of all that religion. Jesus would get mad at the Pharisees and call them whited sepulchres. If you ever Google a whited sepulchre, they're beautiful on the outside, and they're full of dead men's bones. And it's like I told you, my mother had tried to abort me. Didn't know it. And it came out in the spirit realm with some things that I hopped. And I went through some major deliverance, but I couldn't get that suicide spirit off me. I mean, I never remember a time growing up, and I'm a German-Irish farm girl. Dad stuck us on a tractor at 12 and, hauling around this big thing. But I never could get rid of that desire to kill myself. And just open up my arms and bleed out. And it became critical. My boss at work, she took me to the healing room over there, the healing house. And they just said, "Sure, you have to accept the fact that the Lord put you in this position, and you're going to be a voice for those that don't have a voice. You'll be used in the ministry of aborted babies." And I still struggled. It's like, oh, I don't like this. I don't want this calling. And I knew I was supposed to get up and come here to church. Because there was a lot of travail, a lot of crying about, I had a little vision of all the babies that had been aborted. And Linda started singing. It's Linda, right? She's like a little songbird up there, and I just said, I'm taking this coat off, and I'm going up there, and I'm going to open up these arms, and I'm just going to dance with her. And then Mike in the sermon said, science has proven, and I didn't really check this out, but science has proven that before dawn, the bird's tone, their frequency changes, and the flowers open. And I thought, well, Lord, that's it, isn't it? That's the missing step to the suicide spirit that hangs on me so hard, isn't it? I need to open up. It's one thing to know this inside, but it's another thing to open up and let that resonance go out. I was meant to be here. And I can't help what my mom did and everything else, but I can help the truth.
That's right.
I talked about the sperm and the egg, and it's like this one is meant to go through, then, anybody here, if you have trouble with a suicide spirit, cutting any of that, that's just a big lie. A great big lie of your life.
Yes.
He has a truth. He wants you here. He has a reason. Hang on.
That's good.
Anybody else?
Very, very quickly. When was it that you began to discover the 0 point field?
What was what?
When was it they began to discover the 0 point field?
How did they discover it? When? It was talked about 40 years ago. Back in the 60s is when they first started trying to, so Pardon?
Theoretical concept.
Yeah, the theoretical concept that there's something else out there, so to speak. And it's just been literally in the last 3 years that they're actually starting to capture that energy. Almost like in the 80s, when they created the MRI machine, they knew that our body emits radio waves. You know, when electrons, when you take a magnetic field, you pull electrons away from the atom. And when you take that magnetic field away, they drop back in. When those electrons move, they emit a radio wave. And that radio wave can be picked up by sensitive equipment that now see, okay, that's the image, that's what MRI is. They fine-tuned that. And the guy that went through a lot of the study with that was from Switzerland, I believe. German place. But, so now they're starting to develop and advance what they were just really thinking about 40 years ago. More recently,
just a quick scripture here. You know, when Terry mentioned the mud pack, that excited me so much. Sandra had this done back some time ago, I believe, and then Mike had it. But the first thing that came to my mind was when Sandra told me she'd either had it or was going to have it. My mind immediately went back to John, the 9th chapter, when the blind man came to Jesus. He had been blind from birth.
I was going to talk about that. I'm glad you're bringing it up.
And they asked him, said, who has sinned, him or his parents? And he said, neither, but that the glory of God may be manifest. And when he had thus spoken, he spat on the ground, made a clay of the spittle, and anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay, and said to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam. And he went his way, therefore, washed, and came seeing. Yeah. Praise God. It's exciting when science begins to agree with what God's already done.
That's a good one. And then there was another one where, I thought it was chapter 9. Was that the one where he says, now what do you see? I see men as trees walking. And he touched him again. And then he could see clearly. He did 2 miracles there. And what science now shows that the retinas of the eye and what we pick up, literally, it's more what we project, what we see, rather than what's out there that we see. If you understand what I'm saying. We send out photons of light, and that's almost like a radar. It bounces back to us. We see it as a holographic image. It goes into centers of the brain to actually interpret it and create a visual object, so we don't destroy it if we try to touch it. So in other words, there's 2 processes or 2 mechanisms, or multiple mechanisms. There's 2 mechanisms that has to do with vision. And one is seeing, and the other is actually the recognition of it. So the one that was blind from birth, when he touched him, or I don't know if he fiddled it, there's a whole lot of stuff that when you read some of the miracles of Jesus, it's like, oh, that's cool, I understand that. But he healed him first to be able to see with his retinas. He healed him second for him to be able to interpret it in his brain. So now science has proven that that's true. It's like, yeah, we do that.
It takes a while for it to get
there.
Yeah.
Well, before we leave, why don't you introduce your family?
Yeah.
Okay. Iris, my wife. Micah, my oldest son. And this is Charles. This is his cousin, my nephew. My sister's son. And my second son is Caleb. And his wife, Tiffany. And say, Kelly is with us too, and that's Tiffany's friend.
Let's give them a good hand for being here. We have an announcement before we leave, and
they'll make that.
If your name is not in the old directory, put it on the back of this page. I'm going to put this on the platform back there where the camera is. If your address has changed that's in here, make the change back there also. If you have an email address and we do not have it in the directory, would you give it back to us also? Okay? You know, we've been talking about freedom up here. I had a thought, a lot of people carry their past sins around in a bucket with them so that they can bring them up now and then and deal with them, you know. You know, I tried to deal with God with mine the other day. He couldn't do it. He said, I forgot.
Okay, remember, put your email on there. If you got a new email, scratch it out. Look on where your name would be if you've been on the directory before, because if we happen to close church for real bad weather, check your email, okay? So I'll try to get that to Mike real early on Sunday morning. I was over here before daylight and checked it out this morning and thought I'd probably have to sweep snow, but I didn't. Anyway, and then Tuesday nights, a prayer meeting, just come to the shower, 5:30, 7:30, you come late, come early, wherever you want. You just pray that you want to leave, you have to visit. It's just a prayer meeting, okay? God bless you. Let's stand. All right. Shake hands with those around you. Make sure you shake hands with visitors and say something that will edify them. All right? Bless you. Have a good week.